Ugh. Let me get comfortable. Uh, yes, a few things I want to talk about today, but the main thing I want to talk about is the why these what possible reasons why billionaires are obsessed with building rocket ships and getting into space. And I think what you'll hear will be pretty mind blowing, but surprisingly a lot more plausible than many of you may be aware of. Highly plausible, in fact. And we're going to, scientifically plausible as to why they might be doing it. Before that, I want to talk about today is H.P. Lovecraft, the American science fiction and horror author's 131st birthday. So, happy H.P. Lovecraft Day. As many of you know, I have been greatly influenced by his writings, his basic attitude towards the cosmos, and his fiction, quote unquote, and what it has brought to into in terms of manifesting into this reality. I think Lovecraft was an absolute genius, and people like to do things like claim, oh, he was racist. Well, everyone was racist back then, but towards the end of his life, he had redeemed for that, and he wasn't a very good writer. I would argue he was a superb writer because he told exactly just what was needed to be told, and to impinge in people's consciousness, and that's why his stories remain so powerful, and his work has only become more powerful the more we learn about things like deep space, cosmology, psychology, particularly Jungian psychology, and the bottom of the oceans. And all these things have basically been validated in real time since his death. So check out my documentary, which I'll pin down below, Liber Providence, which I made a couple of years ago after a visit to Providence in Rhode Island for the Necronomicon. And it was also, my plan was to write a book at one time, but there's loads of Lovecraft books out there. I thought a film would be better, and people tend to watch films more these days anyway. So the film, Liber Providence, if you have an hour and a half to kill, you'll find it fascinating and well made. But I went on location. I didn't sit at home taking snaps off the internet, and it's definitely an interesting thing because I believe he was either a secret occultist or a passive occultist, but he had magical powers, and the evidence for this is overwhelming. And I have a great affection for him. When I went to visit his grave in Providence, I was actually deeply moved by the experience. Just this simple headstone in Swan Point Cemetery. And it was like being in a psychedelic haze. You could feel the energy of his work everywhere in that city. And so check it out, and check out my theories as to why I believe he was either a passive occultist or he was a knowledgeable occultist and hid it. Didn't want to tell anybody about it for lots of reasons. Now, to the matter at hand, which kind of segues nicely into this, talking of cosmic horror. Why the hell are billionaires suddenly obsessed with getting themselves into rocket ships that can get off the Earth as quickly as possible and return to Earth as quickly as possible, safely? That have no agenda in terms of seeming to be launching satellites. There's the European Space Agency and other space agencies around the world, as well as NASA, have been doing this for decades. They are the experts on it. There's never any talk of payloads in terms of like it being a commercial enterprise. And people say it's an ego thing. It's just an ego thing. They have so much money, they're just like, ha 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 ha. It's like, high society taken to the literal term, high society, But I feel now, the more I think about it, there's a darkness to this. Now, this is kind of out there for some people, but bear with me, this is not scientifically out there incredibly or anything like that. Now, most of you watching this channel and following my work and in this kind of scene are aware that every so often the Earth's magnetic fields flip. North becomes south and south becomes north. And right now, we're not only overdue a magnetic pole flip, but we're due we the magnetic poles are acting very strange. In fact, magnetism all over the earth is acting very strange, suggesting the flip is coming. It's hard to know when, but the flip seems to be determined by changes in the sun, particularly solar plasmic flares. And now you see we talk about coronal mass ejections. These a massive flare from the sun is like sun cycles or sunspot cycles. They're regular. They're like the seasons where a tree grows leaves and it sheds leaves and that kind of thing. But it's over thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And this what happens is there's a blast from the sun. It seems to be preceded by the Earth's magnetic field going into wobbly. The solar blast hits the Earth, incredible power, and the Earth's magnetic poles flip. Now that doesn't mean the Earth flips upside down. The magnetic pole flips. Okay. And that was always very interesting to me because I always knew about that, because they can measure magnetism on rock strata going up and down the side of a mountain and see north south north south. Now they've always known this, but there were anomalies in there regarding periods where the changes were very strange. Now, as if something had happened, like the Earth's crust had displaced itself from the interior of the planet and moved. Like, suppose you were able to separate an orange skin or a grapefruit skin from the fruit and rotate it around the flesh on the inside. That's what happens. The Earth's crust seems to move when this happens, and various people have determined that it moves to a 90-degree angle, so it doesn't flip upside down. It rotates slightly like a ratchet. It moves slightly, okay, on its own crust. Not slightly, 90 degrees. It's just not slightly, but it doesn't go to full 180. So where you are in the world changes geographic location. So, for example, Ireland and Britain will move towards the equator. So we'll settle in an area that has a climate similar to Sri Lanka or southern India. And that sounds very good, except for one thing. Evidence suggests that this flip of the Earth's crust 90 degrees happens fairly quickly. Now, if it happens slowly, it wouldn't be a major issue. You just we in, say, this part of the world would just notice our summers getting warmer and warmer. What did it tell us about global climate change? Warmer and warmer until we're in the tropics and the stars in the sky would be in different places and certain plants would die and other ones would flourish. Now, but it happens. The evidence seems to be that it happens fairly quickly. And this comes with the risk of tsunamis caused by the sloshing effect of the Earth's crust being displaced from the interior of the Earth. Now, this could well explain why Egypt is in the middle of a desert today. And we know at the time, 3,500 BC, and the other periods, Egypt was a lush forest and much older. If you look at the weathering on the Sphinx, that was a place of lush tropical rainfall for thousands of years, by the way. And then suddenly the desiccation happens of a desert 3,500 years ago. This would explain why we seem to have ancient societies that had tremendous technical ability, particularly in things like moving stone. And stone and bronze are the only things that would ever last. Stone and bronze. Everything, even, like, I put a Dell computer out there years ago, and it's gone. Even the plastic is melted away. Bacteria eats the plastic. So these people are saying, like, if there was a high-tech society from 3,500 years ago, we'd be finding all this machinery and everything. No, it all rots away. Because it all except bronze and stone. And what do we see? Remarkable bronze objects and incredible stones that we can't move today, like Baalbek and other places, and pyramids, the Great Pyramid. So And things like those interlocking stones in Peru that seem to be softened or some kind of liquidized and then slotted into place at strange angles and stuff. So these great, incredible mysteries of the megaliths. And we don't really know how old some megaliths could be. Like, Stonehenge could be much, much older and have been moved there. And there could have been perfectly smooth stones that were cut at sharp corners and laid out in a perfectly engineered and symmetrical enclosure, and it just looks like that now from centuries of weathering and the cold English winters and stuff like that and rainfall. And so this earth crust displacing and suddenly shifting 90 degrees would explain why these civilizations seem to be in the wrong places today, but also seem to be, they're much older than they are, and also why they suddenly vanished, why the technology never continued. It was a reset. And all through mythology, there are stories of the stars in the sky were in a different place one day, and then the next day they weren't. And that would be explained by the planetary crust rotating 90 degrees over some distance. You see the stars the stars that are at the equator this time of year would suddenly be directly overhead in this part of the latitude, because we'd be in the equator regions. And this brings us to today. Assuming, and that we know there's another agenda behind this whole scandemic and this lockdown. Oh, there's a big scandemic thing going on. Assuming beyond that, it's something like this, okay? A massive planetary upheaval that the establishment and the globalists can do nothing about. So they create a cover story of a pandemic and they lock us all at home. While in the middle of all this, they start flying themselves up in the air in spaceships, testing it. And that sets off alarm bells, okay? Now, suppose they had figured out. Watch the YouTube channel Suspicious Observers. It's very good for this stuff. Well, for the science behind it. So I'm only going to give you the kind of the sort of the basics of it in terms, but I'm adding the globalist dynamic to it. Suppose something was happening where they were genuinely starting to figure out and believe that this crust displacement was imminent. Wouldn't this explain a lot about the behaviours of the elites? So for starters, where Ireland and most of the United States is now, we move towards the equator. And so a lot of Europe, we move just around the equatorial regions. Global warming, okay? Why did Bill Gates build a massive seed bank in Norway, which will be, if this now I'm just saying he didn't do it for this reason, I'm just speculating, if this glacial crust displacement happens, where will it be? In the equatorial regions, just north. It'd be kind of north of Ireland. It'd be kind of like where North Africa is now. If that happens, this 90-degree turn happens. Suppose they knew this 30 years ago, and they started doing things like building seed banks and building all their doomsday underground bunkers. For example, friends of mine in Britain have told me, particularly ones who live in the southwest of England, that there has been on older RAF bases or military bases, massive underground construction has been happening. Bigger than when it was supposed to have been happening during the days of the nukes and so on, atomic warfare. And this I can believe. So you create a cover story initially of global warming, climate change, to try and get people to behave in a certain way. They have a certain ownership. They have a certain responsibility to do what governments do, what tell them when it comes to the planet. There's a moral thing. There's a planetary issue and there's a moral crisis involved. In fact, the Irish Times today even said the best thing that came out of the scamdemic was that it created a sense of global unity. See? So we now live in a kind of a feudalistic time where you have these super billionaires with tremendous amounts of money. You have the middle class being demolished into the working class and not able to afford property, home ownership, and lots of other things. And you have a massive displaced class. Now, under the most simple, under the most basic rules of economics, what we had with the Corona lockdown and the whole collapse in world trade since March 2020 should have destroyed our economies forever. It should be the most pressing thing, because it would be beyond a depression. It'd be a mega depression. But it's not like that. It's not, and they all talk about things are going to be okay. But they talk about things like universal basic incomes, where you're paid just to sit at home, smoke weed, and play video games if you want. That's the kind of life you want. Now, why would they suddenly change all this stuff overnight to tell people not to work? Just go home and all your needs will be taken care of. Almost like we're on kind of a socio-economic life support. On top of that, creating a pandemic is a fantastic cover story because it makes people frightened and then more dependent upon government propaganda to save them. You get to change their behavior and modify it, okay? Knowing that most of the population of the world, particularly the ones who live in cities and on coastal regions, are going to die from the sloshing effect of the displacement of the crust, or wanting to ensure that the most intelligent people survive this displacement of the crust, you introduce a DNA treatment that gives them blood clots, doesn't protect them from this virus, and kills lots of them. In fact, we'll probably kill all of them sooner or later. And you wait for the ones who are so stupid and so fearful to run out and roll their sleeves up to eliminate themselves in a classic black magic way. While the others who said, we're not doing it, I'm not getting part of that, you wanted those to deliberately survive for it to be the ones in the new world, because they're the ones of cynicism and of intelligence. Okay? But it's a risky gamble. It's a risky gamble. No one knows for sure what would happen. Now, I think where I am, I have a pretty good chance of surviving this if it happens. Well, I've got a better chance at most places than many people. I'm on a hill above a river valley and a big river, so that if there was a tsunami, it would create instant drainage very quickly. And there's also a range of mountains between me and the Atlantic Ocean, average height between 2,000 and 3,500 feet. So that's, even by the biggest predictions of a giant surge, that would keep it away from me. But it could also go around the mountains and come into the sides. But having said that, that would give me a better chance than, say, if I was in a coastal city or lived in a waterfront community. But it's a risky gamble. You just don't know for sure where it's going to be okay. Now, in order to, so you say to yourself, well, I could build a house on top of a mountain that would be higher than all the possible tsunami options, but would it fall apart in giant earthquakes because of the movement of the earth? So basically, everywhere you are on earth, you're taking a risk. If it's not the tsunamis coming from the wave, it is the the possibility of massive earthquakes, the certainty of massive earthquakes, and then volcanic eruptions and other things from that. Okay. So what's the only surefire way of avoiding all that? As soon as it starts, you have a spaceship, and you and your friends and what you want to survive go into the spaceship, you fly up into space, you wait for the rotation to happen, and then when the flood waters are subsiding, you come back down to Earth in a safe location that hasn't been damaged, because you know for sure it hasn't been damaged. So basically, you go up into space, the Earth flips 90 degrees, the earthquakes, the volcanoes, the sloshback tsunamis all happen. You're looking down from space, okay, it's settled down, and you say, okay, Colorado's perfectly safe. And they land there. Doesn't that make an awful lot of sense? And you could say, so that's completely far-fetched. Did you think you were going to be locked down for a virus? And living like this, and listening to that propaganda in the world you live in, this time 2 years ago? There's no such thing as far-fetched anymore. There isn't. They go up, they wait, and they come down, because they can afford the spaceships. The governments don't have to worry about it, because NASA will build similar rockets, and the European space stations and the other ones. So basically, the establishment globalists and their families and their tow rags and all the things they want to save fly up into space, and then the rest of us down on the Earth are left to deal with it. Now, long before it, most of them would have died of needlecraft. And the ones that are left over, before it happens, might stage revolutionary activities. They might start going after the elites on the fight. They might figure out there's something going on here. They were lying to us. Let's tool up and go after the elites. The armies would say the same, or the police would say the same. But who wouldn't say the same? How about 50,000 Taliban fighters flown over from Afghanistan? Males who've had decades, their whole lives since they were babies carrying an AK-47, who have been told that if they come, all they have to do to be safe is to go to the West and wait to be called up as the new security system. These people won't have any affection for you because they can't speak your language. You're an infidel. And they're told that this is part of jihad, and they do it. And you're saying, where's my police force? Well, they've been disbanded and replaced by these guys that came over recently from Afghanistan. That's your new police force. And take a look closely at the photographs of the plants. It's all males in their early 20s. The oldest one looks about 30. And they all have rough complexions. These are not Kabul civil servants and business people who supported the regime. These are people, look at their pictures, who've obviously been roughing it all their lives, living in the mountains of Afghanistan, carrying an AK-47. None of them also, a friend of mine pointed out, none of them have reading glasses, which again shows, where do you get reading glasses up in the mountains? That's, first, I've no doubt about it. What's in those planes is a Taliban. It's a Taliban. No doubt about it. And if they're given some kind of jihad mission to hold us down while the elites escape, either to their underground bunkers, to their mountain ranges, or up into space where you're guaranteed. Going to space, the only one that's 100% bet is getting into space, getting off the Earth, waiting for the rotation, and then landing. That's the only one that's a surefire guarantee of survival. All the others come at massive risks. The underground bunkers can be flooded or ruptured by earthquakes. Or something could happen, like lava could spill over them and entomb them there forever. Likewise, the mountain refuge could collapse and fall under earthquakes. Or there'll also be massive changes in weather. Some place where you think is a desert, now you're covered in 50 feet of snow. You know about the flash frozen animals in the Arctic tundra. It was and that's how it happened. 1 minute they were in a temperate climate like here, munch, 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 and then frozen solid. a few seconds later. Well, not a few seconds, a few minutes later, because they were suddenly moved up into an Arctic region as the crust displacement happened, and that's why they find fresh food in their bodies. And that will happen to humans. And Antarctica, oh mysterious Antarctica, will be moved out of a polar region and into basically where Australia is now. Now, so that'll be a massive continent there to be repopulated with a good climate, an excellent climate, ready to be used for agriculture and Bill Gates' seed bank. The establishment and the elites will want people to survive on Earth, and the survivors will be looked after because they will be seen as the creme de la creme. And they won't do anything. They'll kill off all these. They've probably already given the vaccine, the needlecraft, to all these Afghan hitmen, police operatives are bringing in right now at the moment, so they won't survive anyway, long term. It'll be us who refuse the needlecraft who'll survive. And we're lucky enough to be in a place where when the sea level rose, it didn't come near where we live, or we didn't freeze, or we floated on a raft, and we built it. We found, just like loads of people survived the tsunamis that happened in Indonesia and Sri Lanka and also Japan, by literally grabbing onto things and floating. And they were washed out to sea, but they paddled back in. Loads survived that way. They saw like a floating empty plastic central heating tank, very buoyant, and just grabbed onto that, and then they saw the door of a fridge stuffed with styrofoam insulation, very buoyant, floating, and they got into it, and they tied it, they bundled. There's loads of stories that they bundled things together to make a makeshift raft, and then waited, and then just paddled inland when when the sea settled down. There'll be lots of that kind of thing. And then the elites come back down in their spaceships, wherever survives, Antarctica, and they start saying, okay, well, we build a new world from here, or wherever. And if they locate the areas around the world where agriculture can still continue, and mining and everything else, and that's the Great Reset. That's what the Great Reset is something that they're subject to, and everyone. Now, added to this, there's been lots of stories in the media recently. What would be the best countries to survive in? And the top countries to survive an apocalyptic thing on Earth was Ireland, Iceland, Australia, New Zealand, and somewhere else. I can't remember what it was. I think the UK was up there as well. Why? Because they'd be moved down to the Ireland will go down to the equator. Australia and New Zealand will go up to the equator, and they won't be areas where they'll be frozen to death. They'll still have to deal with the slosh. But like I said, there's all kinds of variables depending on what direction the slosh goes. If the slosh has south towards South America, it will bypass Britain and Ireland, or it will only have a minor effect. But they mentioned countries that would actually be equatorial if the flip happened. I found that very, very fucking interesting. The countries that will be fucked by the whole thing will be Japan, northern China, Japan, China, huge sections of Russia, and much of the North Pacific, parts of Canada, and right down, they will be flash frozen or frozen. They'll be Arctic regions. And then countries below that, Vietnam, Indonesia, Korea, and so on. Well, maybe on the very south of Korea will be like where Scandinavia is now, and they'll have a Scandinavian type climate. And then below that, the Philippines, and all across through parts, a strip, and we're going sideways now, a strip right through to Britain and Ireland will have a climate that will be varying from Northern European to Mediterranean to tropical in the case of countries like Ireland and the UK, Australia and New Zealand. So I find it interesting that all these things tally up now. That the Great Reset is literally the displacement of the crust. A year ago, I've always known that put it this way, I've always known that the magnetic pole flip was coming. And I've always been wary of it. of but not in a doom kind of way, because it's very survivable in lots of ways. You've seen me make videos about coronal mass ejections and how dangerous they are, but they would only affect the side of the Earth the CME hits when it comes from the sun. Very dangerous, but if you're on the other side of the Earth, you're in the clear. You've heard me talk about a giant asteroid or meteor. Still a possibility that could be hiding from us. There does seem to be an increase in this stuff, but more and more I'm inclined to move towards the crust displacement 90-degree rotation of the planet. From watching this, now you know me, I'm not the type who sits there. I don't smoke weed, I don't drink alcohol and watch videos and sit there and get stoned down in my head watching truther videos or conspiracy videos. I watch things and I'm very conservative. In fact, a lot of people in the alternative scene hate me because I am conservative. I'll be the type to point out and say, what are you talking about? That's easily debunked. Although I'm not a debunker. I'm very much into the cynicism of this scene, but I don't walk around blind. And I don't blindly accept the latest trend, whether it be mud flood or Tatari or bullshit like that. Although the mud flood thing could be explained by this, not in terms of like cities buried, like with the architecture, what you say, neoclassical architecture. I'm talking about like where there are mud splashes all over the earth, where huge areas are covered. That could be done by this. And perhaps those mud flooders are like the canary in the coal mine, and with all their things they get wrong and all the pictures they show that are easily debunked, maybe these canaries are renfielding what's coming. Maybe the flat earthers are renfielding and canarying what's coming, because a subconscious part of the collective unconscious of them knows that if the earth was flat, it wouldn't tilt. So it's a fear kind of based reaction. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The earth, but they don't really know. It's subconscious. We're in there. That's weird. It's like a weird movement. Then this is a slightly earthquakey zone, but that was weird. But that was really fucking weird. But and maybe it's what you call it. Actually, that's probably what it was. It was probably a what you call it, the Jungian thing, where the body where the mind gets so intense that it actually causes a change in reality. And I think I moved the car forward a little bit, even though the handbrake is on. A catalytic. I can't believe forget it. What the catholic? I can't believe I just forgot that right now. It'll come to me, but a catalytic effect caused by extreme tension, and that's kind of weird because I was talking about Jungian stuff, and we have the thing of the octopus. Now the octopus is the king of the sea, because it's a highly intelligent animal, and the oceans are bigger than the land. And this whole thing, this octopus consciousness, and also brings us the Lovecraft thing, is that the octopus is also conquering the land that's flooded by the tsunamis by means of the crustal displacement. You see, I'm a very big believer that these things don't happen accidentally. That they exteriorization catalytic phenomenon. That's what I think of it. Catalytic exteriorization phenomenon, and that's what it's called. When your psychic energy is so high, it moves objects in the physical field around you. Like I've often seen people have rows and glasses or glass tables blow up and things like that. Anyway, catalytic exteriorization phenomenon. And anyway, so I'm starting to wonder now, so many things in my life, it was almost like all my life I'd wondered if, all the things I took an interest in, there's a purpose to them. And the work I do in the alternative, there's a purpose to it, a grand purpose. And yes, the totalitarian nonsense and monstrosities of the current needlecraft That's part of it in terms of the psychic aspects and the psychopathic aspects, and longing for freedom and all this kind of thing. But the other side of it is earth changes. Why am I interested in mysteriously ancient civilizations that are no longer around here? When I go into the Hypergeum Halsafanili in Malta, why was this underground complex built like this centuries ago? And we hear about, meteor showers and asteroids and CMEs, but we don't hear too much about the crustal displacement thing. People like Graham Hancock years ago wrote about it in his books, but I don't think I think his was a 90-degree turn, of the 180-degree turn. But this 90 turn seems to have a lot of, if you go to Suspicious Observers YouTube channel, it seems to have tremendous amounts of evidence about it. This ties in so many things, from the global warming stuff to the lockdown to keeping us like this, to the sudden strangeness of the world. And I hope it doesn't happen. Well, actually, the sooner it happens, the probably better off it is, because I don't want to live in this police state for the next 50 years. Well, I won't live that long, but any of us doesn't want to live the next 30, 40 years in this horrible police state. It'd be better to happen tomorrow and we could start over life again. But, all the catastrophe movies and everything else, I tell you, it does make me wonder big time. If the final kind of like piece of the puzzle that made me wonder what this was all about was the 3 billionaires building rockets and going into space temporarily, with rockets that aren't designed to go anywhere except just to go into Earth orbit and spin around for a while and come back. They're not really designed to go to Mars or the moon or anything like that. They're designed to go up, exactly what we saw, spin around a few for a while and come down. And that's exactly what you would need for a 100% surefire guarantee way to survive this 90-degree crust displacement. I know it's out there. I'm throwing it out there. I'm not trying to frighten people. I think a lot of us will have a good chance, depending where you live. It might not happen as quickly as they think. It might happen slowly, and there might be very little effects in that. Of course, if you live in Japan and you're suddenly in the North Pole, that's not going to be fun. But if you live in Ireland and suddenly have a climate like Sri Lanka, it'd be quite nice, actually, once you don't get enormous, floods and stuff like that. So it's definitely one that got me thinking, is that one. It's got to the point now where I don't even believe anything they're doing now is anything in any way connected to a virus. I've known that for a while, but I don't even think it's anything like, resetting the banks and all that. So to reset the banks and to change the financial system and go cashless, you don't need something as massive as this. You can do it very easily. It can happen very quickly in a few months or something. You don't need this. This thing they've created is the ultimate Trojan horse for something else. And that something else is far beyond the elites, satanic pedophiles and the elites trapping us down. It's far, far beyond that. It's something much bigger. Because they could do that anyway. They've got the armies, they've got the weapons, they've got everything they need. They've got the banks, they can do anything for tomorrow if they wanted. There's something else going on. And it's you add up all the dots together, and I think we're heading for a polar flip, magnetic flip, that with the possible, and I said possible, 90-degree shift in the Earth's crust as displacement from the inner core of the Earth. And it's either one of those things or both of those things. The ideal scenario would be the magnetic flip, because that's quite survivable, although we don't know the real effects it would cause. The crust displacement thing, well, people survived tsunamis, people survived Phuket, people survived Fukushima, and maybe if you live in London or New York or any coastal city, you might survive too. In fact, you have a better chance there than if you were in the countryside on a in the middle of nowhere, because all the stuff that's washed out of the city, well, you'll be able to build rafts out of it and stuff like that. And it depends where you are, of course, and how you. But like the sea level starts rising. You're going to make sure. The important thing is make sure you can swim. That's what I would make sure. And if the sea levels rise, your instant priority is to find something to float on, because that might give you a chance. Or get up land. If somehow we got a decent warning, it was happening in 2 or 3 hours, get up into the top of the mountain and stay there. Just grab as much food and water as you can, throw it in your car, or even if you're stuck on foot, or just run up the mountain, run up the mountains, just run up them. And there's a very famous video of Fukushima. Most of the people that died in Japan tsunami were killed in their cars. The water came in, and in the electronic locks, they couldn't open the car doors. Which is something I find a weird health and safety issue. Why do you have to have electronic car doors? If you fall into a river, you're doomed. But they couldn't get out of their cars, and they drowned. So most of them were killed, other than once things fell on them and stuff like that, or drowned in their houses, couldn't get out the door. But there's one video of an old lady, and she must be about 80 something. And the poor old dear is running up the hill from the tsunami as best she can. And not very fast. Little more than walking place. But guess what? She survives. She survives. And what did we learn? And that's what happened. I was in Sri Lanka where the tsunami hit there not too long ago. And what happened was, when the sea went out, they all ran out. See, they all ran to the beach to go, where's the ocean gone? This happened in lots of places. The ocean's gone. It's vanished. And then it came back. And they were not on high ground. This is why I'm trying to study auguries. In Sri Lanka, there were people on elephants and that were doing sightseeing, tourists, and the elephants started going nuts and ramming them up into the mountains. The elephants knew it was coming, and they saved these people on their back. And that's why I'm always trying to watch the auguries, watch the animals. Watch the auguries and watch the animals. Now you might say, so I live in Switzerland, I'm perfectly safe. If Switzerland warms up very quickly, there's a danger of floods from the ice and the glaciers in the Alps melting suddenly. You don't have to deal with that, And also floods, rivers will spill their banks left and right. But everything is survivable. I always think of that old lady in Japan, that video of her running up the side of the hill, and she escaping the tsunami, while down below it killing hundreds, maybe thousands. She just did the natural thing you should. She went to the top of the hill. So that should be our motto for us in the tribe, and people think like us. Learn to float and learn to climb, and you might survive this and end up in a whole new world. But I just, people need to keep an eye on these. Even if the nunness comes through it, but I think it's definitely something like this. Keep an eye on these fuckers with their rockets, because their actions are telling us more about them and what their future plans are than anything else. Okay, so take care, and I'll see you. Bye. And watch my Lovecraft film.